A warm welcome. We are looking forward to these thematic streams that you have decided to join. The stream is titled International Food Trade. We have been lucky to have expert speakers that will help us to set the stage for the discussion. But please keep in mind that this session is heavily relying on your input and your contribution. We have prepared this session with the issues that you have brought up in the submission during the registration for this conference. We selected the issue based on the popular demand, meaning we made clusters, but of course the issues that were quite heavily mentioned using different wording, but they seem to be talking about similar challenges, were clustered by us, and you will further on be able to take part in the interactive session, having a look at the issues. But we will start today with Dr. Luca COSCIEME, who will introduce, or in other words, set the stage for today's session. Luca, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Trina, and thank you all for being here on this thematic session on international food trade. My name is Luca COSCIEME. I'm the research program manager at the Hot or Cool Institute in Berlin. If you can please start sharing my slides, I will then give you an introduction on what we'll be talking and discussing about today with your input. Next slide, please. The objectives of today's session are particularly challenging, I would say. They are to identify major challenges in food trade, in particular in the Asia-Europe context and in the context of climate change, and also to try and combine this perspective on with the goals of a circular economy. We then also discuss different approaches to trade risk assessment and to international cooperation, discuss short-term and long-term solutions, considering also the role of multinational corporations, and gather policy recommendations from multi-stakeholders for addressing these challenges. Next slide, please. So as I say, this is a very challenging task because we are asked to combine three things that are inherently complex by their own, which is the circular economy, which has, of course, its own goal and its own principles, international food trade, which has some particularly specific characteristics, and climate change, which of course implies a high degree of uncertainty about several of the elements that will influence our well-being in the future, and of course also food production and of course indirectly then food trade as well. Next slide, please. So let's start and put together some of the elements of these pieces we have to combine. On one hand, we have international food trade, which is globalized, which is predominantly affluence-driven, more than needs-driven, which involve large-scale and long-distance transportation, and which is controlled, for lack of a better word, by a limited number of multinational corporations, which, let's say, play a predominant role when it comes to the flow of food commodities globally. On the other hand, we have a circular economy that emphasizes local consumption and production, that emphasizes reducing imports, and that has, its own goals of circularity, which involve the reduction of environmental impact, but also, of course, reuse, recover, repurpose, and redistribute. And I would invite you to think about these goals not just in terms of food per se, but also in terms of the resources that are important when it comes to food production and food trade, which of course is soil, is water. And for example, we saw yesterday in the session on agriculture how important is managing soil, of course, when it comes to food production. Next slide, please. All of this, which already creates some tensions we would have to discuss, has to be discussed in the context of climate change, which implies an increasingly uncertain future, changes in food and energy prices, mostly unpredictable or predictable only to a certain extent, changes in crop yields, and changes in the needs of different countries and different players in the market, which would result from the above. Next slide. This is just one model of how yields of main crops could change in the future. I wouldn't recommend you just to focus on this particular set of numbers. It's just a model. We have several different ones. The important point to note here is that we know that climate change will affect yields of major crops worldwide. We would have an increase in some region, and we would have a decrease in some other regions. So we need to build an international food trade system that is able to adapt to these changes. In this particular model that I'm showing here, which is produced by the International Food Policy Research Institute, you can see they predicted that there would be substantial loss of potential average yield from some of these major crops here, corn, potatoes, rice, and wheat, by 2050 in Asia and Southeast Asia, while in Europe, the situation is a bit more mixed, with production increasing, or with yields increasing in some parts of Europe and decreasing in others. Next slide, please. We know then that food production and international food trade will not just be affected, will not just be a victim of climate change, but is also, of course, a contributor to climate change. Here on the left-hand side of this slide, you can see emissions from production of food, which of course we can consider as embedded impact then to food commodities that travel around the world. You can see in total terms here how South and Southeast Asia, which is the first column on the left, is the one responsible for most of the emissions from food production. In orange, you have the emissions from animal-based food, and in blue, from plant-based food. Of course, when then you look at the per capita and per unit surface emission as well, the situation is a bit different, with actually South and Southeast Asia having the lowest amount of greenhouse gas emissions from food production per capita. On the other hand, on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see greenhouse gas emissions due to import and export of food. And here there is a prominent role of Europe, mostly due to the high amount of flows of food commodities within or between European countries, or EU member states in this case. Next slide, please. These are emissions from a food system in pre- and post-production processes, not considering agriculture. So of course, these are also parts of the impact of international food trade, food transport, and also packaging, which here is included in the supply chain, and which accounts more or less, I believe, for just a bit less than 5% total emissions from the sector. Yeah, here you can see that emissions have been increasing since the 90s until 2018. And but I would say that transport still represent a minor contributor to greenhouse gas emissions from the overall, of course, supply chain of food and food trade. Next slide, please. Of course, when we're talking about food and food trade, I think if we want to maintain a broader system perspective, we would have also to look at the resources that are involved into these trade flows. And of course, this includes soil, it includes land, it includes water and other resources as well. There has been a phenomenon that has been increasing since 2008 with the rise of food prices. It's often referred to as land grabbing. We could also use the term large-scale land acquisitions, LSLA, sometimes often used, which involves purchasing by foreign investors of large-scale land in different countries. And here you can see this is very relevant for the Asia and Europe context, with Asia being one of the major continents where land is located, land that is purchased then for foreign investors. This land, of course, involves and embodies a number of resources, such as, for example, water. Here you can see, for example, how Indonesia, or the land located in Indonesia and purchased by foreign investors, it also involves transfers of green water, which is basically rainwater, and then blue water, which is basically irrigation water. So when we sell this land, we are also losing access sometimes to these resources. Next slide, please. Beside land and water, there are studies that also show how these transfers of land can actually impact the ecological balance of different countries, and that these are driven mostly by affluence. So we have investors from high-income countries with purchasing power in the global market that are buying land abroad, sometimes regardless of the needs of the investing country. So this, of course, poses a series of issues when it comes to food security, food sovereignty, and access to food by local communities, but also can have positive impact sometimes when these investors actually promote more sustainable agricultural techniques and food production techniques, and actually providing infrastructures. Next, please. We will try also to look at the role of multinational corporations and food trade. We know that 70% of the world market of agricultural commodities is shared by 4 corporations. In Germany, it has been calculated that these 4 corporations account for about 85% of food retail sales. Similar numbers can be found in other countries, for example, in the US. These corporations provide infrastructure to many individual farmers and operators, so they allow for these farmers and operators to access the global market that otherwise they wouldn't be able to access. But their activities can also impact production method and traditional food chains. And this is, of course, important when it comes to combining international food trade needs with the goals of a circular economy. Trade agreements are increasingly including rules and regulation, intellectual property, health and safety rules, labor standard, investment measures, and others which sometimes favor, let's say, these multinational corporations, and the role and goals of these corporations should then be readdressed in line with the circular economy principle and in the context of climate change. And this was my last slide. I hope this provides some food for thought for the session, and I'll leave now the floor to Gina and to the experts.
Thank you, Luca. That was very insightful. I would like to now pass the floor to Teresa, that will be representing the input from the multinational company point of view, buyer. And we are really privileged to have such a distinguished company with us today, because I think the discussion about international food trade without the company that is one of the key players on the market would be less meaningful. Teresa, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Gina, and thank you to the organizers who have invited Bayer to participate to this conversation. My name is Teresa BABUSCIO. I work for Bayer, and I also would like to thank the colleagues in the IT department of this conference who have changed my presentation last minute yesterday in order for me today to concentrate a little bit more in 8 minutes on solutions rather than rather than framing the challenges that Luca has just given a glance. In fact, we all know the facts. Growing population, limited resources, and the pressure on the ecosystem due to climate change. Please, next slide. And therefore, when we think about agriculture, we cannot miss to state that agriculture is facing big challenges, but also big opportunities. It's not only about food, but as Gina and Luca have stressed, is also about thinking that we as humans, we not only eat, but we need clothing, heating, transport, housing, which means that we need to produce more on the existing land. At Bayer, though, we remain very positive. We believe that we can meet the challenge and innovation will be key. Innovation, though, does not only mean boosting or increasing the research and development, and so to discover, but to also switch our mindset and embrace what is already existing that can deliver sustainable farming. Which means, the first conclusion from our side is that what matters is not the farming model, but is the farming performance. So it does not matter whether it is organic, agroecology, agroforestry, chemical, industrial, conservative. All farming models for us have the potential to deliver sustainable production. And as such, and moving to the next point, which is very key for us, if that is proven true, we need to enable and provide farmers with the key tools, existing and new ones, that can enable them to deliver. And again, here, it does not matter whether the tool is conventional, biotechnology, organic, chemical, you name it. If the tool is able, combined, in integrated solution to deliver on sustainable production, it would be fit for purpose. Next slide, please. And here I ask the IT colleagues to click all the points because I will bring them all at once. Thank you very much. At Bayer, we believe that we can all contribute to make our food system more resilient, more resilient by combining several factors. I will touch upon the integration on the supply chain in a little bit more time when talking about food loss and waste, which was one of the themes which I was asked to address as part of the solution. I don't think that I have to add more on the digitalization of the economy. Bayer is also here to provide the integrated solution that will combine crop protection, seed, and digital tools, and therefore infrastructure are needed in order to benefit of those ones. And then, as I mentioned, as this session team is dedicated to non-tariff barriers and trade as part of the solution, if we want innovation, we need also policies that enable innovation in all parts of the world in order then to take full advantage of the production system. And we also need trade enabling policies in order for this food produced under sustainable practices to fly, or I say swim, from areas of surplus into areas of deficit. Next one, please. So, as I mentioned, innovation is going to be key part of the solution. New discoveries, but also integration and combination of existing ones, and how to feed 100 billion people without starving, 10 billion people without starving the planet. We believe that reducing food and loss and waste is part of this answer. According to our vision, food loss and waste and its reduction can be a triple win. Reduction, in fact, can save money for farmers, especially smallholder farmers, companies, and households. Let's think that, for example, in the US, an average family of 4 wastes roughly $1,500 worth of food per year, which means 1.2 million calories, which can feed another person in 1 year. Therefore, losing or wasting less food means that we can feed more people and alleviate pressure on climate as well as on water and land. Next one, please. And we at Bayer, and please click on everything. Thank you. We at Bayer, as I mentioned before, we believe in the integrated value chain, collaboration and education, especially but not limited to the reduction of food loss and waste. When I say enable, the word is used on purpose because the integration and collaboration along the supply chain will enable our sustainability commitment. However, as you may imagine, being an input industry partner, we don't have control over the supply chain. In fact, the food can have a different destiny, or if the trajectory can be derailed. That's why through our model that is shown here on the slide, we really aim at start right with the input industry, with the input that we give in order to set the right trajectory. Often, and Luca has been very clear on this part, often globalization is accused to be the cause of the problem. But at Bayer, we believe that globalization, please click on the slide, will offer the solution. We cannot think today to remain in silo and believe that if we find a sustainable manner to produce in one part of the world, other part of the world, especially when thinking at the scarcity of natural resources, may not have the chance to benefit from it. Next one, please, which is going to be a key one and approaching our conclusion. Therefore, what we believe is that innovation will enable sustainability to fly, no matter in which part of the world. Innovation, new and existing, in an integrated manner. We need all around the world policies that enable innovation to fly. Cooperation is key. Private and public partnership is key. Being at the table in multinational fora like this one is key to find common solution. Bayer is willing to stand and be part of the dialogue, but also policies that enable trade and enable food produced on sustainable manner to fly and to be part of the supply of other countries is also key. And today we still don't have a common way of thinking around the food standard, as I mentioned in our preparation, and it's key to look and find solutions also in this area in order to profit at max of the international trade potential. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Teresa. This is wonderful that you make an effort also including last-minute preparation to make sure we are updated with the solutions, not only the problems and challenges. That's really thoughtful of you. So we appreciate it. And we will still have a time to discuss the solutions more in detail. As I said before, the solutions we have on Padlet, so when we have interactive session, we will just migrate there and everybody, both experts and participants, will be able to have a look and add on the input. So that way we are trying to make sure that we are all able to participate in this session. And without any further ado, I would like to invite Ayumi YUASA from OECD Development Center. Ayumi, the floor is yours for your presentation.
Thank you, Gina. Yes, good afternoon, good evening, or good morning to everyone. It is a great pleasure for me to join this timely and important session today. Can you put the first slide, please? My name is Ayumi YUASA. I'm Deputy Director of OECD Development Center. Just to quickly introduce my center, We specialize in development and provide peer learning platform where developed countries and developing countries participate in equal footing. We have 55 member countries. Half of them are developing countries and another half are developed countries. And developing and emerging economies, including 8 Asian countries, 10 African countries, and 15 Latin American countries. Our Asian member countries include Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, Japan, Korea, India, China, and Kazakhstan. Next slide, please. Let me try to bring some of our related knowledge to this session based on the outcomes of the OECD initiative for policy dialogue for global value chains, production transformation and development, and our tool, the PTPRs, Production Transformation Policy Reviews. The initiative on global value chains is a peer learning platform that gathers high-level government representatives from Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the OECD. Business leaders and international organizations. In that framework, we implement the PTPLs, Production Transformation Policy Reviews, which enable us to look in detail in different industries and their scenarios. In particular, we have been working on agro-food value chains for development since 2017. I would like to make 3 points which I believe are relevant to achieve the sustainable agro-food systems in developing countries. Next slide, please. The global agro-food industry is undergoing a deep transition. In particular, 3 trends are redefining this industry globally. First, there are new demands. Consumers worldwide increasingly value quality, traceability, and sustainability of agro-food production. The market for healthy food is growing, linked to the increased attention of middle classes to overall well-being, and not only price. Also, greener and more inclusive value chains are demanded. Second, new technologies are reshaping production and exports. Digital technologies are influencing the whole value chain from production, marketing to logistics and retail. As a result, the capacities needed to compete in the industry are becoming more sophisticated. Next slide, please. Third, the emergence of new regional markets could also open up new opportunities for developing countries to scale up, upgrade, and green their production. For example, in Africa, the African Continental Free Trade Area, when fully implemented, will create the world's biggest single market for goods and services by number of countries and an integrated market of 1.2 billion people. For Egypt, the AFCFTA will add 32 new FTA partners, including some of the continent's largest economies, such as South Africa and Nigeria. Next slide, please. For example, 56% of Egypt's agro-food exports are primary products, which with products such as orange as major exports. In Italy, the same figure is 3 times lower at 16%. Fresh goods fetch higher prices and they require high skills and infrastructure to deliver them, such as cold chains. However, on average, developing countries miss out on the higher value added and therefore miss learning opportunities that can be reaped by processing products and developing brands around them. Local firms participate little to international agro-food value chains. For example, in the Dominican Republic, only 23% of agro-food exports are linked to agro-processing value chains compared to 40% in Spain. Next, my last slide, please. Even though developing countries lag behind in innovation capacities in industry, they do have institutions and competencies that could be better exploited. For example, most countries in Latin America invest more in agriculture research and development rather than the national average on research and development in general. As you can see in the slide, in Chile, Brazil, and Costa Rica, for example, they invest more on agriculture research and development. Some developing countries are taking a head start on sustainability. The Dominican Republic, for example, is the world's largest producer of organic cocoa and organic bananas, representing more than 30% of organic cocoa and 50% of organic banana productions. So therefore, developing countries could better leverage on trade and FDI for competitiveness. I shared some example from our past PTPL's studies, mainly in Egypt and the Dominican Republic, but we are planning to have more of these PTPL's policy reviews in some of the Asian countries. So I look forward to share some knowledge from our upcoming policy reviews also. So in concluding, in my part, in addition to provide rigid analysis and data, OECD Development Center as multilateral organization continues to provide a platform for multidisciplinary analysis and policy dialogue with a wide range of governments and non-governmental actors to identify effective policy solutions to the challenges of development, including today's topic. With this, let me stop here. Thank you for the opportunity today, and we look forward to future exchanges and collaborations with all of you. Thank you. Back to you, Gina.
Dear Ayumi, thank you so much for this input. I think it's always very meaningful to have a different perspective on what is happening from the organization that is overseeing multiple countries. Then you aggregate information in a different way. I think very often when we work on the national level or in a specific region, sometimes it allows us both to see more and less at the same time. So always expanding the view and changing the lenses for the same issue from different perspective allows everybody to see more and hopefully progress more. I also welcome proposals such as we are working on the policy and then we are looking for the input. So we are more than delighted to further on share the outcomes and then see whether we can leverage on the inputs we have gathered so far. Because I have to admit that in the history of the ENVforums, we have never had so many submissions from the participants. So that was at the registration stage very, very active contribution and work. Having said that, we still have another excellent speaker. Last but not least, I would like to welcome Takashi Yamano from Asian Development Bank to share with us his perspective on the international food trade. From what I did a sneak peek, so it would be also looking at the issues such as aquacultures. So Takashi, the floor is yours.
Sorry, I was muted. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Gina, for introduction. So my name is Takashi Yamano. I'm Principal Economist at the Asian Development Bank. Please go to the slide. You can go to the next one. So my today's talk is based on a report that we recently published. It's called the Asian Development Outlook 2021 Update, and we have a thematic chapter focusing on agriculture. So a wide range of agriculture issues, but today I want to focus on aquaculture and the trade of aquaculture. Next slide, please. As you know, that the demand in Asia is changing. So this figure shows on that the increasing demand for animal meats in Asia, and also increasing demand for seafood in Asia. Although the demand for animal meat in Asia is still lower than advanced economies, even in 1972, that level, it's still lower in Asia, but we expect that will increase. What differentiates Asian consumers' preference from other regions is that Asian consumers consume a lot more seafood. And, it's a fish product. I don't know whether we should say seafood still, and you will see why in the next slide. Next slide, please. Not this one, but that. But anyway, so as you know, the problem with animal-based product food is it requires a lot of resources. This graph shows that the resource requirement for the 1,000 calories of different food products. On the left-hand side, we have plants-based crops. And on the right-hand side, we have animal-based products. And then far right is beef. As you know, beef requires lots of land, water, and also it emits a huge amount of greenhouse gas and other livestock also. But fish, it requires water, but in terms of greenhouse gas emission, it's low. And other plants, crops like rice, although per calorie emission of the greenhouse gas is low, but because Asian consumers consume a lot of rice, and then from rice paddy, the greenhouse gas methane is emitted, so that greenhouse gas contribution from rice is also high in Asia. But the problem is that, okay, the shifting demand for the animal products, and so that's a problem. Okay, next slide, please. In terms of fish products and seafood, as I said, now only half of the fish product that we consume, it comes from the open water capture. At the bottom, the light blue and dark blue, these are the production catchments from the open water. In the last 22 decades, what happened is that significant growth of green, that is the aquaculture production. Now that fish products coming from aquaculture production is more than the fish products caught in open water, and it is expanding significantly. The difference between the dark green and light green is the dark green comes from Asia. So you can see that Asia dominates in terms of aquaculture production. Next, please. And who produces aquaculture products? The orange at the bottom is the China, PLC. So China produces a lot of aquaculture production, followed by Indonesia, India, and Vietnam. But we expect that Asian countries will expand more on aquaculture production. And aquaculture production, it can happen in the water or coastal area, but more and more it is happening in the field, replacing crop field. Next, please. And in terms of trade, as you can see, it's expanding. The blue one is China. Although we cannot differentiate fish export from the open water catchments from aquaculture in this data, but we know that the export of aquaculture product is expanding from major countries like China and Indonesia and Vietnam in Asia. Okay. So in terms of, next slide, please. I just want to take an example of Vietnam and what happened. In 2000, Vietnam government has allowed the conversion of rice field to fish pond. So the production of aquaculture expanded. Initially, the shrimp exports between producers, traders, and government, they found solutions to reduce the antibiotic residues in the shrimp products. So now that Vietnam became one of the world's largest shrimp producers and exporters, so this is an example of how knowledge and technology can be transferred from importing countries to exporting countries through the trade arrangement. And this can happen not only for the food safety, but in terms of environmental damages. Now, consumers in importing countries are knowledgeable. They know the environmental problems taking place in producing countries. So if that demand for using right technologies with the minimum damage on the environment comes from the trade, that may put pressure on the producers to adapt good practices. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And that's the last one. Oh, no, before the last one. So in addition to the information coming from traders and importers, the digital technologies now provide solutions too. Now, on the left-hand side, it's the aquaculture producer taking a picture of a shrimp and send the picture to through the app, and the experts now identify the problems with the shrimp if they find problems, if the shrimp was sick or suffered from the disease. On the right-hand side also, there is there are groups of producers like on the Facebook and other groups. So they share information. Okay, the last slide, please. So this is a conclusion that, the trade, of course, can have problems as mentioned earlier, but also can provide solutions through the importing countries, because they have different ideas and knowledge and technologies that can be transferred to producing countries. Okay, thank you very much. Back to you, Gina.
Thank you so much, Takashi, for introducing the different perspective from your side. What is going to happen now is we will open the floor for the exploration and for Padlet discussion together with the participants. I have pasted the link on the chat. However, we will be also sharing the screen. So I think what you all would be able to see now is both either the link or the barcode that you can use to connect to our Padlet platform. And once we are at the Padlet platform, Luca will briefly explain what are the issues we have selected for you. We prioritize 3 issues from all the submissions based on the popular demand, which basically means whatever you were submitting and was the most strongly populated with the submissions made it to the top 3 on the Padlet. So please join the Padlet, and Luca, the floor is yours to explain a little bit what is hiding behind the issues.
Yeah, thank you, Gina. As Gina said, we tried to cluster and sum up the many input we got also from the registration process, with also inputs from the experts that you just heard from. So we selected based on that 3 main challenges or issues when it comes to international food trade and circular economy. The first is the lack of harmonized food standards and consolidated approaches to trade risk assessment. So here we have food standards, which, as noted by Teresa as well, are very important, as they can then actually hamper or limit the circulation of food commodities in the global market. So we need for food standards to be harmonized, although we know that there is no one solution for all. So we also need, to do this in a way that is more towards, designing guiding principles than just strict food standards, maybe. And then we need a consolidated approach to trade risk assessment in order for the players in international food trade to have the tools to understand what may be changing due in particular to climate change, and how they can adapt and make the international food trade more resilient to these changes to come. The second issue is the lack of enablers for implementing circular economy goals into food system and corporation practices. This is a particularly difficult one, in my opinion. We know that, for example, corporations and other players in the global market of food are driven by, let's say, mainstream economic goals, of growth and improving, of course, revenues and profit. We need to find ways for these corporations to actually redesign their purpose and their roles toward, instead, the common good or achieving the circular economy goals. So how can food trade and corporation help us achieving the circular economy goals instead of just, let's say, working for continuous growth? And then we have the third one, lack of support to local farmers and companies, affecting localized production and consumption. We know that local production and consumption is an important part of the circular economy. We need to design ways to support local farmers and companies in order to increase this component. And then, as Gina said, here we ask you to click on the plus button that you can find below each one of the issues, and you can add solutions, possibly indicated if this solution is a short-term one with ST or a long-term one with LT. Short-term solutions are things we can do now that can already benefit and address part of these issues. Long-term solutions have more to do with the root causes of these issues and, imply long-term transformation. So you can also be creative there, and please be ambitious as well, as we're trying to move forward and produce innovative and ambitious solutions.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'm still here. Nothing changed. I just would like to have the, while the participants will be adding the solutions, I just would like to have the input from our experts from the session, especially for the issue 1, which is lack of harmonized food standards and consolidated approaches to trade risk assessment. If this is possible, and I could, to start with, could have input from Teresa. Like, what do you think about it from your perspective? What is needed to enable the change, given the lack of harmonized food standards, that also will not jeopardize the operations of the companies, when, of course, there's also issue of profit.
Yes, and thanks, Luca, for embracing this topic as number one. As I stressed in my keynote presentation, we can achieve the best sustainable farming system no matter in the world. And then when moving those goods produced, then we don't speak the same language when food needs to fly from one place to another and trade does not fly. I believe that what Luca said is true. We don't approach the matter of food standard with the mindset that there is a standard fitting all. We need to understand each other through government, through regulatory policies that enable innovation, that there is a level of science and risk assessment which should be acceptable to all. And we have international bodies that can do that. For example, Codex Alimentarius, that regroups the best experts and the best talents from countries around the world, that can give guidance on risk assessment and therefore enable food standards to be at a level which is upper than the national one, which, allow me to say, sometimes tend to protectionism. I can mention, for example, some standards that are not harmonized, for example, in maximum residuum limits for pesticide in food, which are trade standard and not safety standard, which today are not harmonized and create a patchwork around the world if you have different level. We can also think about seeds and genetically modified organism, or in the future new plant breeding techniques that will be an innovative tool specifically addressing climate change. If legislation and standard and regulatory requirement are not harmonized around the world, something produced sustainably through these new techniques or food produced with existing crop protection in one region of the world with a specific climate cannot fly and reach the market in other region, not having the climate, but in need of those resources to feed the supply. So harmonization and reference to international bodies when it comes to science for us as an innovation company is key. And of course, dialogue and being at the table remains important.
Thank you, Teresa, for this input. Can I also have some reaction from Takashi with regards to lack of harmonized food standards? What do you think could be the solution for that?
Well, at all levels, at the government levels and private company levels and producer levels, discussion has to be take place. But as I explained in example of aquaculture, and that is just the example. And then on the different products, through the input, through trade, such knowledge transfers and harmonization, standardizations takes place through business transactions. So that is needed. Without business transactions, it's very difficult to implement standardizations. So trade can play a role, but through trade, the agreements and the regulations and requirements needs to be imposed. And then that, what kind of regulations, what kind of requirements should be, imposed. Those are the discussions at the government level. So, and then scientists has to contribute to that. Okay, yeah, thank you. Back to you, Gina.
Thank you, Takashi. I think the issue is really complex in the sense that when I have to admit, when first time we got this submission, lack of harmonized food standards, we were like, okay, so the solution is to have harmonized food standards. Like it's pretty straightforward, right? It's like, wow, how to invent the wheel. But then, of course, so this was like initial reaction. But then when you actually think about it, yeah, it would be wonderful if it was that easy. Like when you look at the general overall discussion globally, just recently at the COP26, even about the CO2 emissions, the issue related with, we all know that temperature is rising. We all know that GHG emissions have to be kept low. We all know all those issues. However, still one part of it is vested interests, not just among countries, but different stakeholders. When we look at this from the perspective of people that are really looking, like really working in the food industry, but also like our consumers, I live in Singapore. Singapore imports most of its food. And then you go to the shop and then what choices do you have? You have the choices based on what is available. And then the issue is, especially during pandemic right now, how can you actually make informed decisions? When Singapore experienced first wave of the lockdown, people just bought up rice and for some reason rice and ingredients for making cookies were like super important. And And the issue is like when you think about it, what like how this influence all those things. But at the same time, there's global agenda. There's World Trade Organization that is trying to integrate all those things. Every country has different standards. I think the closest is to EU when you have different standards and regulations regarding whether you can sell GMO, whether you can look at the, whether you have informed your consumers about what ingredients you are actually using. And then, but then like to really do harmonized food standards, not just among like one economic community, but also if you look at this globally, when people have so different needs, like we look at the global hunger challenges, we look at the poverty, people are people suffer from malnutrition, and then how do you make it work in general? I think it is like truly challenging. But it is just more my personal sharing than like experts' opinion based on deep research and thoughts on the issues. For that, we have all of you, and Luca is our rapporteur. I just would like to make some connection with what has been happening on the Padlet. We have long-term solution that is implement policies for innovation to travel across borders and trade enabling policies. There is long-term solution define guiding principles and minimum standards as no standard fits all. That is also very true. There is a need for green standards and transparency. I think this is somehow connected. Collaboration / dialogue between companies and scientific organizations, and short-term solution, food quality and sustainable production standards to stimulate producers to reduce environmental impacts of production for accessing the market. There is one more, so if you can also like briefly comment on this, if there is anything new that pops to your mind based on the submission from the floor. But I just have the question that, this has been the question that I have been asking, not just at this forum, but also at the different meetings we organize under the umbrella of Asia-Europe Environment Forum, which is related with the fact when I dream that one day there will be option that if there is a product, the product is designed with the end in mind, which means you cannot design the product that cannot be further on recycled. And it's or like somehow dismantled or somehow utilized or somehow disabled in an easy way. Meaning that we have this comment about transparency, but we just did earlier this year the big forum on plastic, when it was mostly about single-use plastic, when the rate of recycling plastic is single digit. I mean, and then when you look at it, why is it so? It is because there's a different mixture of different plastics and nobody knows how to disable it. But I also know that, of course, it would be very challenging to, for example, from one day to another to introduce such a regulation that would kind of oblige companies, designers, governments to kind of make a push, like educated push towards circular economy, when you are not allowed to produce things that are not recyclable, or they are not, you know, that they cannot be somehow put back to the nature, so-called, or reuse further on. So if you can just share with me those, like your initial thoughts on this, because this is something that is, I have to admit, personally bothering me, because it seems to be approach that might help, but I'm also not heading the operations of the company, so or like having overview at different countries from the economic perspective, how they operate. So if you can share your initial thought on this, that would be very helpful for me, and I hope interesting for participants. Maybe I can ask Takashi first for a change. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay. Okay, about design of the products and how to reduce loss or waste or something like that. Could you
Yes.
reframe your question again?
My question is, in general, how difficult it is to introduce regulation that would oblige countries and producers to only introduce the product and only approve the products, because there's also at the policy level this approval process. You cannot just make microwave and sell it. You need to fit to certain regulations that are either on the national level or international level. But then how difficult would it be, like based on your expertise, to actually introduce the mechanism that doesn't allow to send the product to the market that cannot be recycled, reused, dismantled? And in specifically about food, it is also related to packaging, like in what we package our food, like why it is plastic when it is possible to package it in paper, for example. It's just like some ideas about that.
So you know, first of all, you know, there's a challenge of agreeing on what to impose on. That the scientists and policy maker level, we have to agree on. Okay, so you use this material for the transport of food from when you export from this country or that country, for that, so that the packaging will not be wasted, or use the packages which are recyclable only. So first of all, there should be some agreement, and there should be incentives for traders and producers and both side, importing exporting side, to agree on. So there should be a business incentives to use it. So I think it's possible if the consumers come together and put pressure on the government and put the regulators to impose on. However, you know, coming to the agreement is difficult. So you know, but I believe that the implementation only comes through business transactions. So so that, and then it's, for example, you know, some things, for example, child labor use on cotton production, and because of the countries of the importing cotton products, you know, demanding producers not to use child labor, and it has been like that in several decades, and now there's a pressure on the cotton producers not to use child labor. You know, that's just an example, but that kind of process can happen, and then that demand goes to the recyclable packages or you know, other products that you mentioned. It can happen, but it will take a long time.
Thank you so much.
Maybe we should do that.
Yeah. I'm trying to push this. I mean, I saw it started to pop up here and there, but it's not very strong given the, I think there is complexity of the issue behind, like in the sense that if it was that easy, it would be already in place. I mean, obviously, but we are still here talking about it. I just wanted to check if I could also get a reply from Teresa about this issue. Teresa, are you still with us?
Yes, I am with you, but I need to come back on this in writing. I'm not, and I'm not really an expert on this area, but I'm sure that Bayer would have a vision and also some proof point. Let me get back to you in writing. That's a promise, so that you can feed the conclusion of the conference with also our vision in this respect.
That would be really helpful. Thank you so much for offering this.
You're welcome.
Yeah, because I somehow think that one day we will not even have this thought. Like, it was actually, I was like having this thought when I was at attending one of the innovation conferences, and Tesla was explaining how wonderfully they transform the global market for engines and cars. But then somebody mentioned, okay, this is all great, but what do you do with the batteries that are not working anymore? And then they showed the photos of the batteries in developing countries when those dwellers that usually dismantle metal. I mean, my focus is on Asia, so I saw it in different pictures from different Asian countries when the poorest people from the society, this is how they make their living. And they were picking metals from those batteries because they are almost impossible to dismantle. I think it might have changed by the time because it was like a year ago when it was triggered, but this somehow made me think, if we just make it obligatory that you cannot make the product that that is difficult to recycle or difficult to reuse, of course, like over the long period of time, that might change the level of challenge we are all facing. Okay, I will stop here. I just would like to now move to the second issue, which is lack of enablers for implementing circular economy goals into food systems and MNC's practices. I think I will just go through the issues that were submitted, and then if you have a reaction, you can just comment on what do you think about those. So this is like, one is short-term, long-term solution, regulate market for contributing to circular economy goals, not leave it just to the market. Okay, so there is this challenge. Short-term solutions, switch to more energy-efficient transport modes and more sustainable packaging. Long-term, include circular economy principles in trade agreements. Do you have any comments on all of this, or either whether it is easy or challenging when you think about it? Or is there any other thing that comes to your mind regarding enablers? I know Teresa did the whole presentation about enablers, so I will pass the floor to you.
I just have one comment. The ambition to regulate the markets with the view of circular economy, and particularly on to include these points on trade agreement, is all shareable. However, we need to have in mind that supply chains historically takes time to adjust. So even if we share the ambition, we need to always have in mind that change cannot come overnight, that, as Luca has mentioned, corporations or trade, since we are talking about trade, is organized mainstream. We want all to eat, we want all quality and taste, and we want to pay cheap. So in order to shift and change, including more circular economy, we need to have in mind that there is time for logistics and for supply chain to switch and to adapt. And this is often not taken into consideration. And that's why then you see that trade is distorted. Why? Because if a region of the world regulates over pretending that changes happen overnight, traders will simply deliver somewhere else where these requirements are not regulated so overnight. So my point is to take into consideration the time that the supply chain takes in order to adapt to circular economy.
Thank you so much, Teresa, for your insights. Very valuable as usual. Dear Takashi, what do you think?
Well, it's difficult, but it has different dimensions, right? Circular, when we talk about circular economy and trade, for energies at the energy level, at the logistics level, and then production at the production site and level. So it has so many different levels to talk about, and then of course. At the production level, it's a very local system. It's trade and transactions and transportation. It involves in the case of trade, it involves many countries and regional agreements, trade agreements, and so on. So and also the energy use also is involved. So it's very diverse. If we come down to one specific topic, it may be easy to discuss, but it's very broad issue. So it's difficult for me to comment.
I mean, the beauty of this is you can pick and choose, in the sense that you can narrow it down and make the comment from your perspective. Thank you so much for bringing this up. I think we got one new submission, which is like, I think, part of the summary of what you all just say, a little bit elaborated, but also input from the participant, that it is not about lack of enablers, but the continuous presence of inhibitors. Policymakers need to remove policies that inhibit circular practices. For instance, free landfill collection of waste instead of encouraging the creation of value chain loops. I think, as you said, it's like the topic is very broad. So this is like an example how to narrow it down. I do not think we have such an ambitious goal on this session to solve it all. We usually take it as I call it temperature check. Like, what are the issues that are in mind of people when they think about a specific topic, and how it can be further advanced. We have the third and last challenge that we have selected for this session, which is like very specific, I would say. So, like, as I agree that all the two were very broad as a topic, this lack of support to local farmers and companies affecting localized production and consumption is very specific to the agriculture. And then we had the input from participants, identify practices in short term in countries that might be replicated in other economies. For example, advancement for rural kids from the Philippines. In long term, design strategies to enhance positive contributions from local productions to climate change adaptation and fighting biodiversity loss, among other issues. And then implement ecosystem service accounting to direct subsidies. And short term, provide farmers with the tools needed to provide sustainable production of food, inclusive of infrastructure for digitalization. Do you have any reaction to the issues submitted for this lack of support to farmers, or any thoughts on that topic?
Let me go back before discuss this. Just to mention lack of enablers of the circular economy in agriculture. At the agriculture production level, there has been discussions on the how to reduce environmental damage and so on. So at the production level, there has been some discussion and research and technologies and good practices that has been promoted. Not necessarily adapted, but there has been discussion. But the transportation and trade and logistics, I think there should be more needs to be done, and energy use, of course, use of reusable energy, and then in agriculture, because agriculture requires a lot of energy, and so that is a big area which needs to be also tapped. So I just wanted to mention that, and then coming to this lack of support to the local farmers. As I said, there has been a lot of research at the public research centers and also private research centers. I used to work at the International Rice Research Institute, so there historically there has been some technologies but reaching to a farmer is difficult, and so providing new technologies to farmer has been a challenge. Having said that, there has been some support for them. Now the localized production and consumptions, that is if you mean not the international research and international research, but more localized production and consumption support. Local agriculture extension has been, not so effective. If I can say it. So providing specifically local specific, the support to farmers maybe has been lagged behind the international level. International level, there has been some advancement, but bringing that technologies to the local level and especially designing specifically for the local production and consumption, that has been lacking. Yes, I agree, and it's again difficult challenge because it comes down to local government support and local business entity support. So agriculture is such a diverse, depending on the diverse production conditions. So specifically suitable for this localized farmers is very difficult. Maybe in developed countries that is available, but certainly in developing countries like in Asia, it's difficult to see.
Thank you so much, Takashi. Now I would like to hear from Teresa. What is your initial comment on this? I'm making you all work very hard today.
Yes, thank you very much. And thankfully, I nearly have always something to say or to contribute. It's not specific to transport, but when it comes to staying close to the farmers, Bayer has this in its genes. And this is all around the world, but specifically for the support of smallholder farmers, we, as a commitment of sustainability, we have the goal to empower more than 100 million smallholder farmers to succeed. And this is not limited only to provide input tools, but also through education and through alliances such as Better Life Farming Alliance or Water Efficient Maize for Africa. You can Google on our website. So it's not really very tailored, but it can include transport through partnership. Bayer is doing already so.
Okay. Thank you so much for saying that. I'm not going to share my experience, even though I have to support the point from my personal so-called anecdotal experience point that was Takashi making. I actually started working in Asia when I went to Bangladesh, and my first project was support for the farmers when basically it was encouraging them to gather in the cooperatives and then negotiating pricing, and also discussion on, I think this was also mentioned before in one of the presentation, also like very basic things like how much fertilizer to use, because usually the fertilizer is subsidized, and then when there is no clear instruction, there's this approach, the more the better. So this is really challenging. So I think this is really uplifting to see that the companies are engaging directly with the farmers to also look how those things can be improved. I just would like to thank all the participants for submitting the input for this session. And I just would like to conclude this all with asking all of you, like if you were to pick one solution that is now something that you believe could make a difference, either in short term, in long term, like which I'm pretty sure is something that you are thinking of or already discussing in your respective organizations. What would be your focus? Like what this solution could be that you think can make the difference? I can see Teresa is ready.
No, please, the other first.
Takashi.
Well, I don't know if it fits the theme of this international trade, but climate change definitely is a big challenge for agriculture production. So climate resilient agriculture production technologies are the ones that I think is one thing that can help farmers, producers, to mitigate the impact of climate impacts like droughts and floods or salinity. So that's one thing I'd like to pick. Okay, back to you, Gina.
Thank you, Takashi. I just would like to warn Luca that I will also ask him this question, but now I will give the floor to Teresa.
Okay, this panel is about trade, so I'm reasoning what could be a solution or part of the solution mid-long term. I risk to repeat myself. Policies enabling innovation and enabling trade can be a short and mid-long term solution. We are tremendously equipped to innovate agriculture. Governments need to enable this innovation in their territories, and bodies such as Codex or others that can be seen as guidance super partners, because Codex does not have a national interest, but the super partners need to be strengthened in their capacity and in their, let's say, value to set some guiding standard, as Luca called them, guiding standard for all.
Thank you so much, Teresa. I think if something is relevant in the sense like you think it will really make a difference, it really makes sense to repeat it. I do this, this is my philosophy in life, that if you say it enough times, it will become like the truth, and then people will start repeating it as well. I also saw in our submissions, there were people that were commenting about innovation. So definitely there is more people supporting this point of view. And Luca, when you were looking at all the issues and listening to all the experts and doing research, what do you think could be the solution based on popular demand?
Yeah, well, if I can, as we shared many kind of short to medium-term solutions, if I can go a bit more general, and sorry about that, or a bit more transformative in the very, very long term, I think that today we have a global market of food which is not serving the purpose it should be serving, which is basically allocate efficiently the food we have. It's not doing it properly, otherwise we wouldn't have so many people lacking food. And of course, also overuse, if you wish, in other countries. So we wouldn't have this high inequality in food access and in food availability if the market was working properly. So, and this is because it is not serving, food is not flowing from where is not flowing towards where is needed, but it's basically just either circulating between high-income countries or just flowing from low to high-income countries. So basically, who can afford to buy food is getting the food, not who needs that. So we really need to change the culture that is behind that, and this means, of course, redesigning all our economies away from economies where economic growth is at the center towards economy where the well-being of people is instead at the center and is the overarching goal. So I'm sorry, this is not a very kind of practical or very immediate solution, but I think it could be a good complement to the others that have been highlighted, so on innovation and on policies. So really the need to redefine what's the purpose of our economies and of our markets.
Thank you so much, Luca, for bringing this up. I think in sociology, there is a concept that is called what do we owe each other? In the sense that whenever we do whatever we do, we also need to think about higher context or bigger context of whatever we are doing, and then for what we are doing and what is the ultimate objective. So thank you for bringing this meta perspective to the mix. And then with that, I would like to conclude this session. Thank you so much to all the speakers that have been working very hard today to put up with the comments from the participants. And then we are still waiting for further input from Bayer regarding the product design. I mean, this is something that also can be further elaborated. And thank you so much, everybody. And I invite you for the plenary session when we will be doing summary of what has happened during these 2 days and what are the conclusions and what else we can offer to continue this dialogue on these important issues. Thank you.
Thank you.